has gone to your expectation. God bless you all. Today we have a very, very special guest. He's been with us before, but we just felt we needed to pull him back again and get him on this platform to speak about some issues that are of great concern to us. Victor Lutenco is currently the Senior Program Coordinator of the Migration Management and Head of Sub-Office with the International Organization for Migration. He has 16 years of experience in design, coordination, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of development programs with a special focus on migration. He has worked with government entities, international organizations, and NGOs in Moldova, his home country, as well as in the US, in the Russian Federation, Italy, Armenia, Belarus, Central Asia, and Mongolia. He's traveled all over the world on this particular subject, and is here working with the UN Migration Agency in Nigeria, looking after our immigration matters and helping to support the Nigerian government and also the international government in handling this issue of migration. It was he that said about, I think, 2,000 people, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, virtually leave Nigeria almost on a daily basis on legal migration, and maybe another 300 to 500 leave illegally, and some have to be brought back to Nigeria, sometimes in plane loads. And the dangers, the difficulties, the challenges, and then the economic issues surrounding this Japa syndrome. So that's why we're looking today at Nigeria and the Japa syndrome. What do we do about it? How do we control it? How is it affecting our economy? And so on and so forth. But maybe I should start on a personal note with Victor. The dangers, the difficulties, the challenges, and then maybe I should start on a personal note with Victor, who I like to consider my good friend now, and ask him, how did you, Victor, you are most welcome again. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, especially now that we have a new government in Nigeria. I think the last time we spoke, it was still the old government. And maybe part of what you'll be doing for us today is to give the new government what you consider to be advice as to what they should do with the situation we found ourselves in right now. Well, maybe I should start on the personal note, as I said, and ask you, how did you get involved in all this immigration business? You've been at it in so many countries and so on and so forth. What was the interest and what led you to become almost a migration expert?
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for this invitation. I'm very glad to be here and to discuss about this topic that I consider very important for the world and for Nigeria in particular. To answer your question, about maybe 23 years ago, one of my first activities while I was still in the university was to train young kids to do debates, to get involved in discussion, very close to what we're doing here, but in a kind of a structured manner. And one of the topics that we were discussing was migration, and particularly combating trafficking in human beings. And at that time, I was approaching it just as one of the subjects, but little by little, I became interested in that and got more involved into details and into the thinking how to improve the tactics to combat trafficking. And I got invited to an NGO, and one of my first activities was to go together with the police officers from my capital to Moscow into a joint operation with the special forces in Moscow, in which we captured 3 traffickers and freed 7 victims of trafficking. And I had the opportunity to come back with them in a train and to discuss and to get an understanding about what is that, what is happening, how the recruitment is taking place. And to be sincere, this gave me an inspiration for, a quarter of a century ahead to try to be part of the fight and to be one active person on one side trying to minimize the negative impact of migration, and on the other side trying to capitalize on the positive side. This is how I started.
Oh, fantastic. See how life and fortune takes us. What is the state of migration all over the world? I don't know if you have a helicopter view or whatever view of what the migration figures are here and there. I know you did help me with some statistics some time ago, and thank you very much for that. It was quite a well-received speech at the University of Lagos a couple of weeks ago. So what's migration like in the world? And from a global point of view, how is it affecting the world? And is there a crisis looming and things like that? What do you think?
Migration is growing. In 1970, we had about 85 million migrants all around the world, which represented 2.3% of the global population. Today, we have close to 300 million, which is 3.6% of the population. So we have more and more people. I've seen today an article that was quoting the former chief expert on the panel on the climate change, who was saying that anything that is happening now in the Mediterranean with migrants trying to cross into the Europe will be dwarfed in the next 30 years by the proportions of the climate migration, of the displacement caused by climate change. I know that my organization and also others do estimate that in the next 30 years, we might face about 1 billion people on the move just because of the climate change. But we, of course, know that we do have different other elements that do work as push factors for migration. First of all, the economic inequality between the countries, which stimulate a lot of movement from more poor country to more rich countries. We do have demographic imbalances, very low fertility rate in Europe versus high fertility rate in countries in Asia and in Africa specifically. We have the insecurity situation, the wars, the conflicts that again are stimulating people to move. And let's say smaller considerants that are different maybe from one country to another, but that are also contributing to the movement. So let's say the COVID was a time that maybe the number of migrants worldwide, they plateaued a little bit, but now it's catching up. And looking at our numbers, because we also provide medical checks for the Nigerians who are applying for visas for some countries. And we're looking at these numbers and we see, for example, that the numbers are catching up now. They're returning to being high, to being at the pre-COVID level. And we might soon get close to the top numbers that we saw in 2016, 2017. The time which was called the migration crisis in Europe. And I guess that's why you use the word crisis. Unfortunately, what back in 2016 was called crisis, next year or the year after might be just normality. And I think we have to get used to that. The more and more number of people will be on the move. They won't be static anymore. We'll have to take into account when we design our development policies, when we design social protection, healthcare, education will have to take into account that some of the people for whom these systems are designed, they're not within the boundaries of the country, they are outside. There are, by different estimates, somewhere in between 15 and 17 million Nigerians abroad. They're sending back somewhere in between 20 to 25 billion dollars annually, which is comparable to what Nigeria is making from selling its oil. So to a certain degree, Nigerian economy, if some people are saying that Nigerian economy is an oil-based economy, then with the same success, you can say that Nigeria is a migration-based economy or a migrants-based economy, just because of the remittances. And I'm not mentioning here the savings that are happening abroad, the investments that are being done by these people in one way or another. That's why, and of course, we do see a lot of negative consequences. The number of people going abroad is hard to estimate because there are different channels. But we are looking at the central Mediterranean route, right? From Nigeria through Niger to Libya, across the Mediterranean. We are looking at the applications that we are receiving through our medical health program. We have some estimates. For example, just the visa application. I'm not saying that all of them are successful, but just the visa application, the health checks that IOM are doing. Last year, we've done close to 250,000, which is
250,000.
Yes, which is about 1,000 per day. Of course, it varies, but I think that gives them an idea on the proportion. So I would say that we are talking about thousands of people living every day. Taking into account also the irregular border crossing that are happening, all the processes. Now, IOM in Nigeria is also one of our main programs is to support the return, the voluntary return of Nigerians from abroad. So just to give you a comparison, since 2017, we've supported 32,000 Nigerians to come back home. And it's not just supporting the return, it's also helping them to reintegrate. So we've helped almost 20,000 to restart their life here, which means, starting a business, startup pack, courses, housing, education for the children. This program is usually tailored. But to give a perspective again, right? What we've returned back in 6 years, we see them going out in 1 month. Let me repeat that. What we've returned with all our efforts in 6 years, we see that they're going out in 1 month. These are the proportions now. Now, unfortunately, we see what we see in qualitative terms. I am yet to speak to a migrant, especially those who went out irregularly, who does not know a friend, does not have a friend or a fellow migrant who didn't die on the way. So these cases are so widespread that it's impossible not to talk about them and not to mention them. People are still taking this very dangerous route. And it's not just dangerous. People are dying. And a lot of lives were lost on this route. Connected to that, we see a lot of cases of trafficking in human beings. My organization alone has been working with about 5,000 victims of trafficking since 2017. We talk mostly about sexual exploitation, but we also see cases of labor exploitation, begging, different other forms of exploitation. And the forms of transfer of the people over the borders, the forms of controlling the people are changing. We see a lot of technologies being involved. We see a lot of psychosocial, emotional forms of control. These are not anymore just, iron chains. Everything is here. But on the other side, we do see a lot of potential. The world is multipolar. The world is global. Labor market, same as any other product market, is for a long time went beyond the borders, and we see that the more countries are involved in active but protected exchange of labor, the more sure they go on the development path. Also, those 15 to 17 million Nigerians abroad, they do represent probably the biggest unexplored development potential of the country. Besides huge amount of money, or even more than that, these people have an immense amount of knowledge. They know everyone in this world. You can get to anyone. I'm sure there is a Nigerian close to all the CEOs, close to all the governments, all the presidents of the entire world, be it the governments, businesses, healthcare facilities, and so on. The networking that the Nigerians abroad can provide for the country, again, the knowledge, the know-how, the access to experience is incredible. The only question is how to harness all of this potential, how to leverage it, how to make it, how to put it to use for the country. And this is one of the directions in which we are working, and this is one of the dimensions in which we are trying to support the government, harnessing the potential of diaspora in supporting the development path of Nigeria.
Thank you very much. And I think you've landed on a very, very important point. And that is maybe now your advice to the Nigerian government as to, number one, what do they do with this migration problems, the rising numbers, people going out every day, how, if necessary, to stem it and get the people to stay or whatever, or how to then harness this 15 to 17 million Nigerians you've spoken about and get it to be a positive instead of a negative. I know that there's some countries that have even deliberately encouraged migration for the benefit of their own countries. I think China at some time did a bit of that, and I think the Philippines also did quite a bit of that one way or the other. I don't know if you know of those experiences. So what's your thinking? What do we tell the government? How can we make the best of this situation at this present point in time? So if you are president of Nigeria, what would you do? And maybe one day we can vote for you, who knows?
That your question contains the answer. I'm not suggesting it. That's something that people have to decide and the government of Nigeria have to decide. But I was talking about these 17 million of Nigerians, right, who are abroad and who have so much knowledge and so much experience, and they also have the money, they also have the potential, but they cannot vote.
They cannot vote.
But they cannot vote, right? Starting from this element. Now, migration is very complex, and don't expect me to have a simple solution for such a complex problem. But there are some key principles that I think we can easily talk about. Does Nigeria have to actively try to stop migration? Not really. Nobody managed to do that. You'll build a wall around the boundaries of Nigeria. People will jump, people will dig under, people will make a hole through, but they will continue to go. So instead of putting efforts into building this wall, I think what is necessary to do is to really look inside and understand what are the root causes and what are the key ingredients that are pushing people to go outside and addressing them. For example, of course, a lot of people will talk about employment, right, and young people. But what are the key ingredients that will determine people to seek employment and to stay employed and to have a gainful and meaningful employment in Nigeria? We just finished a project in Benin City, right? Until now, Edo State is the top state as the origin of migrants from Nigeria. About 30% of our returnees are from Edo State. We've done this project for the past, let's say, half a year. There were about 62 young men and women who studied woodwork and who became woodwork professionals. So we've invited, university professors to help them study the profession. We did some internships. We did some seminars with professionals. We also did a little bit of mental health and psychosocial support. And I mean, surprisingly, even for us, by the end, when people were graduating, not one of them dropped out. 62 people graduated, including 3 people with disabilities. So we asked ourselves, what was so special about this project? What motivated them, right? We also give them startup packs, quite serious one, including like a generator, right? So that they can, start their business. So we asked them, what was the most important part of this program? What made you stick to that, right? And we were expecting maybe the startup pack, right? People are quite linked to the material side. And I was surprised. They said the psychosocial part, the mental health support was the most important for them. What they studied, what they learned is how to work together, how to overcome conflict, how to critically analyze possibilities and opportunities. This was the key. And I'm asking myself, maybe these elements that are not necessarily, considered primary in employment policies, maybe these have to be prioritized now. Maybe this is where we have to invest more together with the government in order to make sure that, all the employment policies, they actually stick to the young people and that we diminish the dropout rate and we really have this, meaningful addressing the economic causes of the Japa syndrome. That's one thing. Second big thing, I guess, is we have to respect the decisions of the people. We have to respect the right of a person to decide their own destiny. And if they decided to go abroad, they don't become less Nigerian. They don't become less human. They don't become less of interest to us and to the government. And I think the policies should just follow them, should learn how to continue supporting them, even if they're going abroad. First of all, to make this path, I think the government should become a little bit more proactive. Of course, not a lot depends on them, but more proactive in seeking the regular pathways for migration, ensuring the protection of the people so that less have to lose their life on this treacherous way. And I think in the moment that the government will invest more in protecting these people, in reaching out to the people abroad, in extending their schemes towards these people, I think the more, including diaspora, migrants, will give back. And I think this is what we are aiming for, right? We are aiming for joining all the forces in order to focus them on supporting the development of Nigeria. And this joining, this getting together is incomplete and will always be incomplete without Nigerians abroad. And thirdly, whose job is to manage migration? Is it the National Commission for Migrants, Refugees, and Internally Displaced Persons? Yes, there is a specialized body. But if we dig deeper, if we try to understand who has a stake in managing migration, is it the Minister of Education, maybe? Yes. Is it the Minister of Economy? Yes. Is it an element of the industrial policy? Yes. Does it have to do with foreign affairs? Of course. Does it have an impact on the healthcare? Very much so. It's everyone's job. And if we learn that migration and management of migration and harnessing the potential of migration is everyone's job, if we take a whole of government approach to it, and we don't push this issue just to one single commission or institution, that's one recipe of managing rightly this situation. And it's not just a government's job. A government by itself will never be able to manage it. We need non-governmental organization. We need religious, faith-based organization. We need media to participate. We need community groups to be involved. So it's a whole of society issue, and it's a whole of society solution that we have to design. Sorry, you have to stop me because otherwise I can keep on going.
No, we're learning. Okay, so that's interesting to see that the psycho-social analysis and input was very, very beneficial to our people. And then respect decisions of joining all the forces together. But who drives this? Should it be an agency of government? Will it be your agency? Will it be private sector? Somebody has to take the lead and drive. That's number one. Then the question that concerns me, why are so many people from my state migrating in Edo State? Is there a particular reason why they are doing so? Have you been able to find out why they have the highest number? And then how you haven't, though you mentioned it, I don't know if you could granulate a little bit more on what Nigeria can do to benefit from these 17 million people.
Now, who has to drive migration policy? I think Nigeria already have an institution. It's called NCFRMI. It's National Commission for Refugees, Internally Displaced People, and Migrants. So there is already an institution quite well equipped, especially at the level of people who work there, to drive the migration management agenda. But they need more support. They need more bigger budget. They need more responsibilities, more attribution. But at the same time, they need the involvement of other institutions. And it's not just their own budget. I think other institutions, other strategies, other sectors have to allocate time and budget for migration, to support migration management from their side. Because only in this case we can talk about like a full migration management. Why people were going away in such proportions from Edo State? I don't think I have an answer for that. I can share some of the thoughts that other people had who are closer and spend more time in Nigeria. They were saying that, maybe people from Edo, they're a little bit easier in terms of moving. They're more open to the idea of changing their place, of looking for new opportunities. So, and then there is a little bit of a kind of a snowball effect here. First, some moving, the information is being passed to others, family members, people from the same community. So this works as a snowball. To what degree this is true is it still hard to say. Probably we'll have to analyze a bit more. But what's important to notice is that the number of people who used to go from Edo, we don't see it anymore. Edo did take some decisive actions to fight smuggling of migrants, to fight trafficking in human beings. The state administration, the governor was very active into that. So we do see a decrease in number. We see now that the trend is moving northward. If before we were receiving planes of returnees in Lagos and then supporting their relocation to Benin City, now we see more planes landing on the Kano airport. And we're receiving Nigerians who are originally from the northern states. What can we do to harness the potential of these 17 million? I think the first thing that we have to do is to listen to them and to see what kind of support do they need. This is the first, in order to ask for something, we have to extend our hand. We have to help them first, do the first step, and that is, stronger consular support, stronger support with all the protecting with their rights, stronger support with the education for the kids, with maintaining the language, the language of their parents, the language of their ancestors, preservation of the heritage, of the cultural, traditional heritage. This would be like the actions 0. And next, I think in broad terms, what we need is, our sense is that people abroad, people in diaspora, they're ready to support, they're ready to help. But they need corridors, they need system mechanisms by which they will support. They need, concrete people here in the country who would make sure that, those doctors can travel back and do the surgeries here. But they don't have time and they don't have the opportunity to organize everything for themselves. There should be somebody who would organize everything so that they can just take the ticket, travel, do the surgeries here, go back, right? Who's organizing all of that? This is what I mean by mechanisms. This is what I mean by concrete schemes. Same refers to professors. Same refers to businessmen, to investors. The Nigerians abroad are the best, not just language, but cultural translators, economic translators. They might become the most effective promoters of business opportunities in Nigeria, right? Because they know the real situation. They know the good and the bad. They know it's not necessarily that they will just promote something that doesn't exist. No. So but they need a little bit more help from here, from the ground, and invest, or something like a diaspora investments desk or something like that. That would help them guide. That will help raise a little bit more protection for those investments. There is a lot that can happen on the charity level, and connected to that, I think diaspora can play a very important role in reacting rapidly and supporting Nigeria, especially when Nigeria is hit by different forms of disasters, being floods, being any other humanitarian need that can be. Diaspora can be a very important partner in responding to these needs.
Excellent, excellent. I think you've made some key points. Listening to them, maybe getting a serious database of all the Nigerians in diaspora and having a means by which we can get their thoughts and get them operating in different communities and making sure that there's strong consular support. That's what you said, and connecting them to home one way or the other, either through language, through food, through culture, and so on and so forth. And then a local system to support their aspirations. I think that's very, very key. And I'm happy that a lady called Jumoke, my vice president, is on the call. And she actually is living in the US, California, as we speak. She's a diasporan herself with a big heart for Nigeria. And I think she's worked with one or two diasporan agencies in America, or Nigerian diasporan agencies in America. So I'm going to be inviting her to come and share her perspective and maybe ask you a few questions, and so on and so forth. But then there's a question by Charles Obi, and he was asking if Nigeria has been officially classified as a migrant economy. I know you mentioned that we could look at Nigeria like that, and so on and so forth. And what are the metrics for the classification? I don't know if you want to take a bite at that, and thereafter Jumoke will come and give a little bit of her perspective and the work she's tried to do in Diaspora, and then maybe coordinate the question and answer session. Thank you, Victor.
Sure. Just very quickly, what I meant by that is, if the Nigerians abroad, the migrants from abroad, they're sending annually $25 billion to Nigeria, that is supporting the economy, that is supporting those who need the most the support, because usually this money goes to those who are poor, those who could not afford some of the basic requirements. Usually the remittances go directly into healthcare, into education. So these are the investments, the most important social investment that the country needs. So if these 25 billions are generated by the migrants, that this is my motivation of saying that, you know, Nigeria might be qualified, besides many others, also a migration-based economy. Now, an important element that I wanted to mention is very often when people analyze the Japa syndrome, they are talking about how Nigeria is deprived of its brains, right? How we are facing the brain drain phenomenon. We are losing valorous people from the country. But there is one issue that is more painful and worse than that, is when we experience the so-called brain waste. It's when the doctors are leaving from Nigeria, and when they go abroad, they have to be taxi drivers. It's when, you know, teachers from here are going into construction jobs. And in 2, 3, 4 years, they're completely losing their qualification. And those years, sometimes more than 10 years of education, the money that they personally put into education, that the government has put in education, all of the value is going to waste. This is even worse, right? So one of the big challenges and one of the tasks of the government, before reaching the level of countering brain drain, we have to counter brain waste. We have to forge agreements to make sure that the qualifications are being recognized across the borders, at least so that the doctors, when they go abroad, they can be doctors. They can continue, because then we still have a chance to return back doctors. When doctors are going abroad and are being taxi drivers for 2 years, in 3 years, you won't be able to return a doctor anymore because doctor is not there anymore. You don't have a doctor to return, you just have a Nigerian. You see what I mean? So this element is of extreme importance in preserving the value of the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very interesting concept, brain waste, and there's quite a lot of it, to be honest. I know a banker who left Nigeria and they found him sweeping the floor and mopping the floor at Kentucky or McDonald's. And they were surprised because he was a top banker. And what are you doing here mopping the floor? Well, first of all, at his level, he couldn't get a commensurate bank job in a bank in the UK. And he says he just wanted peace of mind, and it's like almost he took an early retirement. And that's a total waste. That at least this place is predictable, it is safe. So let me just mop my floor and get engaged. It's very painful, brain waste. So that's a typical example of it. Okay, Jumoke, please come on the platform, and if you have any contributions, it'd be nice to hear or share experience, and then coordinate the question and answer session. So if people have questions for Victor and comments and things, please feel free to raise your hand up. Thank you, Jumoke.
Thank you, sir. Hello, Victor. Good to see you. Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges and how we can address them. There are different groups of diasporans. There are those that, so do you have the statistics on, and I would use the voluntary diasporans, those that left with the intentions of coming back. I know that a lot of us fall into that category, so I would call them the educational migrants. Maybe they left Nigeria in the 70s and in the 80s with the hopes of coming back to Nigeria to give back. And that was when Nigeria was at its peak. And then there are those that are forced economic migrants. Do you have that statistics? Because I believe there is a difference or there is a different strategy for one set in reversing the brain drain to the other set that just want nothing to do. So if you could just speak a little bit about that, and then I'll follow up with a couple more questions, and then we'll start taking questions from the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. No, we don't.
Okay.
No, we don't, and I don't think that anyone can have this. We really lack a good study, a good research on the diaspora. And there are many more nuances of Nigerian diaspora that I would underline, comparing to other countries in which diaspora can be more or less kind of solid, unitarian. In Nigerian context, you can talk about, not just about Nigerians abroad, you can talk about Yoruba in California, for example, and Igbo in the central England, and different other dimensions, right? So we can talk about the professional groups. We can talk about doctors, right? Doctors in Texas, the Nigerian doctors in Texas, or different other professional associations. How strong is the professional motivation for these people and to get involved along the lines of their profession? That's also an important dimension. Now, the business community, the Nigerian community in international organization, there is no international organization that wouldn't have Nigerians in its top ranks. You know, the World Trade Organization is headed by a Nigerian. Deputy Secretary General is a Nigerian, and so on and so forth, right? So the people in the top management position, Nigerians in the top management position, is another category. Now, this creates a very complex mapping, much more complex than in the case of other countries. And I would agree with you 100% that we need to do a good mapping. And it's true that this mapping will help us design different approach and different strategies towards energizing and mobilizing. And sometimes you start from one, and this is helping you mobilize two, and then you have a pyramid effect, right? That will help you go down and secure that you mobilize a much larger base than you started with. So strategically, it's very important, it's very correct. So I would agree with you, but have we actually started this job? Not yet. And this is where we have something that we have to do.
Okay. So I have a kind of a little bit more, I would say, complex question. And a lot of us in the diaspora that left Nigeria in the 70s and the 80s have this romantic idea about giving back to Nigeria. And so over the years have been mobilizing, forming organization. I know I personally have been in the space for probably over 20, 25 years. And but there is a major challenge as well, because we start off as Nigerians and then we become tribal. Right, we become more focusing on our community groups, Egbo Yoruba or the World Igbo Congress, and less of the Nigerian organization, United Nigeria for Nigerians. And then I think one of the more successful professional organizations are like AMPA and the Nigerian Nurses Association. I would say those are the two organizations that really harness their resources irrespective of their tribes, you know, to coordinate these medical missions and give back to Nigeria. But do you believe that there is a role of the host community or the host countries or our adopted countries in really supporting the diaspora efforts in giving back, whether it's through policies that encourage the government to be more attentive to reversing the brain drain, Has there been studies about that, or even strategies that have been developed around that, where the I would say our adopted countries now work in synergy with the diaspora communities to reverse this brain drain?
There have been strategies, and there is a role for countries to do that. There is a strong role, for example, that the United States can play in order to mobilize diaspora organization, and there are programs that USAID is designing specifically in the United States in order to support these communities. Just, let's start from Mexico, right? A lot of support that went into the regional and local development in Mexico is based on the hometown associations that were created in the cities in the United States, because Mexicans they were migrating a lot in a clustered way, right? They were getting basically a locality from Mexico. You would find it in a specific city concentrated in the United States. So that created space for the migrants to associate themselves in hometown association. Now, is there space? Is there a possibility for the sorry, I think the alarm went off here. Is there a possibility, is there a space for the host government to support the activity of this hometown association up to the level of co-sponsoring even this? Yes, there is space for that. There is a possibility for that, and for sure, and also the way examples for that. And I think one of the ways and one of the directions of activity of the Diaspora Association, but also of the government, is to persuade the host government and to advocate for more support for the Diaspora Association. Because like that, we can get them being even more active. And I understand the tribalism issue, but in my opinion, this is something that we just have to accept and we have to go with. If people feel like this, because diaspora works the best the more local you become. When you are abroad, your school, your hospital, your family, your community, your village is much more closer and important than bigger geographical dimensions like LGA or state or even the entire country. Now, using this, the more local you are in approaching diaspora, the more chances of your success. Let's start just by the fact that at least half of the people will just turn away from you when they will hear about initiatives to support diaspora. It's normal. So I think it's in the phase in which we are now, we have to use all possible ways in order to keep the attention of the Nigerians abroad towards Nigeria, and then little by little responding to their needs and recognize the fact that Nigerians in diaspora are not over one single type. They're very different people. They're responding to very different incentives. They're interested in very different things. So the diaspora mobilization policy have to be exactly like that. They have to offer various opportunities, various incentives. It has to consist of various programs that would cater to different interests of the people abroad.
Thank you. I'm going to just one more question, and then I'll yield the floor. So the American Jewish diaspora, the Jewish diaspora community are probably the most successful in terms of being able to influence what goes on in Israel. And then recently, the Indian diaspora community have also played a huge role in rebuilding India. And then there are others like the Chinese and Korea and even Jamaica, Jamaican diasporans. So why would those strategies work for Nigeria? And if not, why not? Why won't it work for Nigeria?
No, they would work. I think they would work. There is a lot of things to study in Israel. And if somebody would ask me, the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, people from there, where should they go, in which country in the world in order to study the most efficient strategies to reach out to diaspora and to build diaspora policy, I would say Israel, first of all. There are a lot of things to study. There are, projects, public investment projects as big as, I think, close to $100 billion. They were 100% financed by the diaspora. Their Taglit program, their birthright program, their different, programs to engage young people, young Jewish from abroad, and so on. They are an inspiration. Of course, it's hard to copy because the parameters of the Jewish diaspora are a little bit different than other countries. But to get inspired, yes, for sure, there are a lot of things to study. And when I was working on diaspora policies in my country, I went to Israel to study. And, the way they say sometimes in policies is, if you have a possibility to copy and steal from other countries, copy and steal. These are good ideas, copy and steal. Other countries will be just happy if you do so. Now, these hometown associations, I think they're quite an interesting concept when you want to support not just the entire country as a whole, but you want to support regional and local development. And the so-called Landmannschaften, when the Jewish were coming from the Eastern Europe in the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, and setting up these kind of hometown associations in the United States just to support each other, but then they started to help back the communities of origin. I think that's also a good example. This is how the hometown associations in the US supporting Latin American countries started, and this is exactly a model, an interesting model, I think, for Nigeria to experiment and to work on. So in conclusion, I think there are very interesting models to follow, but Nigeria have to understand that in order to be able to identify these programs, to study them well, and to implement them, Nigeria needs to allocate resources to that, including human resources, including institutions that would deal with that will have also access to some budget. The investment on return, the return on investment, sorry, for the diaspora policies are usually very high, but there should be an investment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please speak a little bit on, you earlier mentioned having a diaspora initiative, or whether it's independent diaspora desk that can help facilitate some of these initiatives. And during President Obasanjo, when President Obasanjo was in office, the American Jewish Committee, AJC, had actually taken on the Nigerian diaspora to mentor us. And there were a few of us in that program. And then the government changed and everything went off, just went down the drain. It was a great program that we had a lot of initiatives. There were a lot of plans to come back to Nigeria. Every year, Nigerians would meet, go to different localities, or to their cities or states of origin and give back. But that wasn't sustained because as each government came in, then it changed. The policies changed towards that diaspora desk, whether the resources were not allocated to the diaspora desk to support this structure that was in place. How can maybe the community or civil society organization fill in that gap and be completely independent of the government so that it doesn't matter which government is in place? This desk is functional and it does serve that role.
It's a good question, and it's a difficult question. And I can talk more, but I just know that whatever I would say, it will go back to one thing that I've already mentioned. Diaspora has to be relevant for the country and for the country leadership. And it's not just Nigerian, but it's everywhere in the world. In order to be relevant for the leadership, you have to have the right to vote. I think having the right to vote is, and not just the right to vote, right, but to have access to voting is one key ingredient in maintaining the attention, in continuing being relevant, in attracting resources, and having a direct connection to the development of the country. So I think out-of-country voting, facilitation of out-of-country voting for Nigeria is important as a key ingredient to solving the issue that you mentioned.
Thank you. So we'll open it up for questions. We have 4 hands up. You could do this, you can take 2 at a time or 3 at a time, or if you want to take each one, is up to you. What's your preference?
I can take more at a time. Like
Okay.
this, we can answer more questions.
Yeah, okay. So let's take, maybe we have 4 hands up, so we can take 2 at a time. We have, and I'm sorry if I don't, because I don't have your pronoun here, so I don't know if you are male or female, but we have Bola Adetula. Please go ahead and ask your question. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Victor, for the presentation. Now, during the course of your work in Nigeria in particular, and in any other place in general, have you ever come across or found a link, a sort of nexus between migration, whether illegal or legal, and drug trafficking? That is one. Then my observation, you mentioned brain waste. I would want to imagine the brain waste are probably those who went on illegal migration, because those of them right now under this Japa syndrome, most of them have got appointments, very good appointments with good offers abroad. So I will not regard that as brain waste, but at the same time, it is a disadvantage to us here in Nigeria. I have an experience. I won't mention the name of the bank, but this Japa is affecting all the people, the professionals in the bank, that I am feeling it already. Your personal, whatever, keep changing every day, and they are not well trained. So how will you, I don't know, I really, that one is the one that is actually bothering me. And then on this issue of migration, I recall while I was in the African Union Commission that there were some documents developed by the African Union Commission. And then in those days, the United Nations wanted to help Nigeria. They were ready to sponsor medical doctors back to Nigeria, but there was a resistance from the doctors who did not travel out. And then the program failed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we are going to take Bayo. Please go ahead, Bayo, with your question.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Victor, thank you so much for this brilliant presentation. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Now, in Nigeria, there is what I call monumental disrespect, oppression, and subjugation of the will of the people by the government and the institution of states. You know, talking about a recent one, not too far ago, police brutality, NSAS protest of 2020. You know? And so this is a major factor that is, that is making youth, especially, of which I'm one of them, I'm currently in the UK, leave the country. So I'm wondering, is there a way your organization can, address this or talk about it or mention it to the government in such a way that the government, can show more respect to citizens? Even employers can show more respect and just human rights. Give us more human rights in terms of, the way you treat the people. Is there a way your company or organization can address this or can help push for this? Thank you.
Thank you. Victor, do you want to take one more or do you want to take those two? You're on mute. You're muted.
Sorry, I can take more.
Okay, so let me give, I'm going to call on Femi Olowe because you had your hand up for quite a while. So Femi Olowe, please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Mine is just a comment, and it's a sincere advice, not necessarily a question. Part of what you asked, Mrs. Jumoke, when you were trying to pose your question was that we should try and separate the education migrants from those who may be referred to as illegal, migrants. Okay, and that's a good one. So that's one of my concerns, but that has been settled. However, my sincere advice is this. I know that Victor said in his presentation at the beginning that one of the activities of their organization is to work with the government to prevent or advise the government on how to tackle, Japa. And my comment is this, an advice, as I said, is that I will implore your organization not to advise the government against the right of the people to go out legally, to leave Nigeria legally. Because, there are different reasons why, people may want to go out, perhaps in search of greener pasture, perhaps for education, and may want to come back. But then if you get to where you're going and you feel like your sojourn place and you feel the condition there is better than your country and there's opportunity for you to stay, you will stay. So I would say that please don't advise, but what you can work with them is to fix what is making people old and young to want to leave the country, which is invariably resulting into brain drain. Thank you.
Thank you. Victor, do you want to address that or do you want to take more?
No,
And then
no,
we'll take the next set.
Let me take this. So let me take one by one. Is there a linkage between migration and drug trafficking? Yes, there is a linkage, especially on trafficking in human beings. Trafficking in human beings, trafficking in weapons, trafficking in drugs, they're all related under the big umbrella of organized crime. They are cross-subsidizing each other. They're part of usually the same cartels. They're supporting each other, so there is a direct link. There is also an operational link. We've seen many cases in which victims were controlled with the use of drugs, were recruited with the use of drugs. These are not mainstream cases. These are not representing the big trends. These are more isolated cases, but they are there. The brain waste, if this is happening mostly through in irregular migration, not necessarily. I would say that you would probably find more brain waste happening within the regular migration pathways. People going regularly abroad, but without the possibility of pursuing exactly the same profession or at the same level as they did in Nigeria. Doctors going and having been pushed to settle for a nursing job or for another, like a lower level. What is happening usually is that you cannot really stay at the same level, so you have to lower, right? So all this space that is being lost, educational, money, value, this is the space that is being lost. That's why I think we have to work more with the governments, with the Nigerian government, but also the destination government, in order to make sure that there are agreements in place that ensure the mutual recognition of the educational titles, of the qualifications, of the years of experience, so that you can get the same pension for the years done in different labor markets. So it's not just an irregular migration thing. It's an overall migration thing, and government should be really active on that. Now, in terms of if we can do more to help push for human rights, so that people are treated better, that's our main job. This is what we do. But you have to to understand one thing. We are an organization that work for the government, for the migrants, but with the government. You choose the government, we are working with them to support the migrants. This is the division of labor. We are not influencing governments, and you won't hear me commenting about the government, giving any qualifications. I'm happy to work with any government you choose. And we will do our best to promote human rights, to support human rights, to pointing out to specific problems that they exist. And we will continue doing that. And we'll be focusing on migrants. And believe me, we are pushing the protection agenda, especially the human rights protection agenda. This is the most important part of our work. Not to, then just answering to the comment, not to advise to the government to stop, go illegally. Other people on the call would probably attest to the fact that in the first part of my presentation, I was mentioning exactly that. First of all, it's not a good strategy to stop people because it won't work. And secondly, you will never hear IOM going against migration or advocating against migration. Migration is a very healthy strategy. When migration is voluntary, and especially when migration is orderly, migration leads to the development of the person, development of the family, development of the country of origin, and development of the country of destination. Migration is beneficial for everyone, but only, and the key ingredient is when it's voluntary, when it's regular. We don't even say legal. You know, at a certain moment, we don't agree with the qualification of legal. What do you mean by legal? The regular and irregular, you know, depending on the frameworks that different countries are putting together. But we will be the strong advocates all the time in favor of migration, especially regular migration. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to take the next set of questions, and we have quite a few comments in the chat that I'll also be reading out to you. So the next hand up, we have Chinedu. Please go ahead and ask your questions. We would please keep it brief. Thank you. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. Okay. If we don't have Chinedu, we'll go over to Barrister Kachi. Barrister Kachi, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for another wonderful, wonderful meeting to discuss this. And thank you, Jim, for a great presentation there. What I wanted to point out was a couple of things. The issue that you raised about the response of the Nigerian government, you know, in terms of trying to view migration as a negative thing, which is really where all of that sort of anti-Japa response is coming from, is because the benefits of migration are not properly appreciated. Now, can we propose, or I'm proposing that we actually invest more in the type of work that ALG is doing in educating policymakers on these things going forward. I think, Jamaica, that's for you. That's for you to take on board. I think I've been involved in the whole process about the diaspora voting, and I was shocked at the sort of attitudes. I was with the Senate committee. It was shocking how people were wielding so much power over an issue they knew zilch about, absolutely nothing about. And so you stood no chance against such people with such mighty power. So I think advocacy, policy advocacy in that area needs to be increased. On that note, if it's okay, just to remind you that we have some events on this. You do know that we have the National Diaspora Day on the 25th of July. I think it's going to be very, very big this year for obvious reasons. On the 24th, it kicks off with a webinar, which will be discussing the Indian model that Tony alerted to, specifically, because we identified about 3 different ones: India, Ireland, and Mexico. But this one is going to be focused on the Indian approach to it and the lessons that we can learn from that. Then you also mentioned the need to get diasporans to invest. That is already happening. NIDCOM has been driving that with NDIS, Nigerian Diaspora Investment Summit, again this year. So there are activities. I think it's important that we coordinate all of these things together so that it doesn't seem that we don't come across as being discordant in our approach. Thank you very much. And well done, ALG, again, for another good one.
Thank you, Barrister. Go ahead, Chinedu. Chinedu.
Thank you for a great presentation, and thank you for the opportunity to ask questions. Before I ask questions, I just want to make a quick comment. I underwent my master's in England about 20 years ago, and when I started, and I returned immediately after my graduation. Graduation was 3rd of December, if I remember. Before the middle of December, I was back in Nigeria, and I was happy, and I had, fantastic opportunities. And I never imagined that I would attempt a return. But one of the things I would state categorically made me make that decision was when I saw the, forgive me, I'm a Christian, and I noticed, it got to a point I noticed that practically every pastor either had dual citizenship or none of their families were here. And I thought to myself, I don't have a second passport. If something happens here, I'm just stuck, and I refuse to be stuck. And so last year, at the very ripe old age of 45, I made the decision to move. And it wasn't an easy decision, and it still hasn't been an easy decision. But I would say that when leaders glaringly show that they don't trust, they don't respect the country, it will be hard for followers to do. So a good place to start would be for our ministers of the gospel to please don't say one thing with one mouth and say and do another thing. That's and also in terms of, I think it was the Minister of Labor who they were speaking to him about migration of doctors, and he says, oh, they can go, we have more. I think it's also that basic disrespect, and talent will move because talent can move. The question that I have is, okay, so I observe now, because I'm an older student and obviously I have a little more experience, I've been able to have better jobs than the first time that I came. I actually lecture in my university part-time. But I observe, especially in England where I am, that there are, it just seems to me like the average Nigerian who's coming here is just fixated on doing healthcare, and they really don't care. They're not even doing the maths, because I'm like, look, if you're paid £10 an hour and you and you're entitled to work 20 hours, you're definitely not going to make a quality income on this. So are you thinking about the future? So for me, I'm wondering if there's something that we could do, because obviously, when our people are leaving the country and entering, there are some kind of records. Is there a way that the Nigerian embassy in at least the key countries that Nigerians tend to migrate to, US, UK, Canada, those kind of countries, is there a way that their ambassadors can just have like entry programs? I don't know. Just basic skills, things they need to look out for. I don't know. Is there something that, because it just seems to me like we really don't give a shit about our people, and it shows in many ways. So that's the question that, and if there is a way, I would really like to participate in that, and please point me in the right direction. Thank you.
So you're thinking of like an integration into the community or society program for new migrants. Okay. So I have Afolabi, Uncle Afolabi, please go ahead with your question. And then we'll take the last set, and I'll read questions from the chat to you. Uncle Falabi, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay. Uncle Falabi, okay.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Happy Eid.
Happy Eid.
My question is this. I don't know if you know, but a few weeks ago, if you're aware, there were some nurses, I believe, about, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
About 200 nurses who had jobs, and then it was found out they were not qualified for the jobs. And they had to be removed from their posts and everything. I don't know if you know, I don't know if you're keeping records of this, if you're keeping data, statistics on this, and I don't know how this can affect Nigeria if they now come back to Nigeria and apply for jobs as nurses with the certificates that obviously they had that were now found out to be unqualified in the States. And I don't know how, if you're assisting with the local governments in America with these unqualified, obviously unqualified certificates. Thank you, that's my question.
Okay, so Victor, do you have enough, or do you want to take, I think you can take that set and then we'll take the last set.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you very much. First of all, I would be really happy to attend the Diaspora Day. I'm not in the country during that time, but if there is an opportunity for me to participate remotely, I'd be really happy and consider it an honor. And I'm sure my colleagues from IOM who are here permanently, including our Chief of Mission, will be really honored to be part of the discussions and to be part of the processes. You know, judging by the questions, then people don't really introduce themselves, but just mentioning the experience, it looks like here you have a really powerful group of people with a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. And I'm sure if people here can design more of a long-term advocacy strategy for any issue that is discussed today, I'm sure it can be successfully implemented and can really be very lead to some significant transformation. All the experience globally are interesting, and if somebody chose India, Ireland, and Mexico, I think that they're interesting models, but they will never provide the entire solution for the country. They will just provide bits and pieces and maybe some inspiration. But what Nigeria needs the most, and I think several people alluded to that, and even my answers alluded to that too, especially when I said that I don't know, is that the key ingredient for a good policy, including on migration, including on diaspora, is data. Scientifically proven, strong methodology-based data, it's very hard to do an effective policy. So the more data we get on the number of Nigerians abroad, the structure, the different parameters, professional, cultural, income, propensity to return, to invest, and so on. The better data we have, the more institutions we have involved, the government, the think tanks, the local ones in the countries of destination, the ones from here, the better. So I think we will start feeling the real big transformations when these discussions like this one is really very much data-driven and data-based. Now, I completely agree there are different initiatives that are happening. The NITCOM is participating in different initiatives. I've heard about very beautiful initiatives in supporting hospitals, in building schools, and so on. My only comment to that is, imagine if this would be organized and systematic. Imagine if supporting hospitals wouldn't be just ad hoc initiatives, but a program by the Nigerian state supporting this type of initiatives, co-sponsoring, contributing. Imagine if this would be done in a systemic manner. So I think a diaspora policy is about that. It's not about not recognizing something that is happening. 100%, it should be recognized. I would partially disagree with the lady that mentioned also the idea of a second passport.
Thank you.
this is part of the reality in which we're living now. We used to live in strong national states in which allegiance to one state was incompatible with, allegiance to another one. But we are not there anymore. We live in states, in multinational states. We are living in times in which people can have several homes, several countries that they recognize theirs. And it's absolutely normal to have several passports. And exactly as we said that we have to be respectful of the right of a person to go abroad, exactly like this, we have to be respectful of the fact that some of the Nigerians are also British, and they're also American, and they're also Canadian, and they're also Russian, and they're also Chinese now, or maybe something else. We just have to respect their right of being that, but continue working with them because they're not less Nigerian. They're just more of something else. And I think that respecting this element is really the key parameter of a successful diaspora policy. I think I cannot quote or answer to specific people or comment on what some specific people have said. But what I'd like to say is that a lot of countries and sometimes it's not like overall migration policy, but it's very sector specific. You will see that countries tend to focus on producing more of a specific profession, but be very open to the idea of importing human capital for another profession. It's nothing bad in that. It's really trying to capitalize on labor market as a global phenomenon, not just as a national one. So it's not exactly, I don't really see a problem if at a certain moment Nigeria decides that, there is such a big demand for Nigerian doctors, and why not really focusing more attention on medical education? Because this is what Nigeria does well and used to do well, and probably can reinvest forces so that, this defines some of the labor that goes abroad from Nigeria. So if at a certain moment Nigeria starts having a little bit of a more proactive stance towards migration, towards emigration, this is just part of the world in which we're living. Can ambassadors do more actions, can be better educated? We used to have a program, and we actually prepared the feasibility study and everything to support the government to have labor attaches. So basically, specific diplomats who would work in the Nigerian embassy to support the integration of Nigerians abroad, to support their employment, to support basically the connection between the embassies and the Nigerians abroad. It never was never implemented except one labor attaché that is in Geneva now, in the permanent mission of Nigeria in Geneva. But normally and it's not just the function of the ambassador. Yes, the ambassadors could be better prepared, but it's actually about the personalities in the embassy. There should be people specially dedicated and who have to work permanently with the Nigerians abroad, with associations, in understanding the problems, in helping them, and so on. So from this perspective, we totally agree. And usually these are the consul officers, the consular staff. And in very many countries around the globe, we do work with these people. We help them build databases. We train them. So we are happy to do the same in Nigeria. And I think there was a question about the nurses, right? I am not aware of this case, but I'm happy to be in touch with you and to provide, to study the issue and to see what we can do. Maybe at the end of this call, I can leave my contact details so that we can stay in touch with those people who are interested in, and we can just follow up on some of the issues.
Okay. Thank you, Victor. And about the case, the nurses that did not have qualification, this happened in the US, and they found that some of them were actually using other people's certifications or certificates to work, and some were forged. And so that had now, it kind of like sparked a lot of review process, and I'm sure we have a couple of nurses here from the diaspora on the call. So that's what he's talking about. I don't know that is government can really well the home country can do anything about it, because it's part no justification, but they come and then they try to kind of make a living, but unfortunately through illegal means. And so that's what happened here in the US. We're going to take this last 3 sets of questions, and then we'll read from the group, and then we'll close with wishing Pastor Olu a very happy birthday. So please stick with us. The guy behind the scenes, today is his birthday, and we will celebrate him. Go ahead, Dean, please ask your question. Loa, if you could keep it brief, we would appreciate that as well. Dean, please lower your hand and ask your question, or mute yourself and ask your question. Okay. In the absence of Dean, can I have Sulaiman to please unmute and ask your question? Okay. And then I am good. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I would like to help Victor and perhaps also Pastor to understand what is happening in Edo State, because I am uniquely privileged to have an insight into why the Japa phenomenon in Edo State is or has been very unprecedented. So about a year and a half ago, I employed a commercial driver for one of our trucks, and he's from Edo State. And he had a very interesting life. He had left to go to Europe by road and got arrested by rebels in Libya and spent 3.5 years in jail. So after being freed from a ransom with a ransom payment, he was freed from jail by the rebels, and he started working in Edo State. Oh, sorry, forgive me. Started working in Libya, and he was washing cars, and he was making quite a lot of money by Nigerian standards. So he says the governor of Edo State came to Libya and said that the Libya should pack all the Edo State people back to Nigeria. So they were forcefully repatriated, and then he came back to Nigeria. So, of course, he said this the first day he came for the employment, and I decided to help him because, I wasn't afraid of the fact that he'd been in jail or whatever, but I just felt that he needed a helping hand. He turned out to be an excellent driver, although he's not with us anymore. So he opened our eyes to myself and my wife. He opened our eyes to understand why it's such a serious thing in Edo State. So from what he said, which I've confirmed to be true, when people japa in Edo State, it's not like how it is in the rest of Nigeria, where somebody can leave and then you might not hear from them again, or they might just go to school, or they might just work or whatever. In Edo State, when you japa, you are japaing for one reason and one reason only: to send money home, to show off to friends and family. So the reason behind the japa is not, oh, I just really want a better life, but I want to oppress my neighbors, my family, my friends, for extended family, obviously. So that is the key behind it, and that's why it's different from the rest of Nigeria. So when they get there and they start earning money, 60%, 70%, 80% of their money is sent back home. So within 2 years, they're building a house. Within 3 years, they've packed other family members to whichever country they're in. So it's a show-off thing. So sometimes he'd be driving and then he would receive a call And then he will start shouting, "Oh, this person has gone. This person," I'll ask him, who is that person? And he will say, this person that has left is somebody who apparently was very wretched and maybe was at the lower rungs of the financial ladder. He will be so in turmoil that before you know anything, this person will start sending money home and start building house. So for Edo, it's different from the rest of Nigeria because it's all about how do I push my family forward and so on and so forth.
Thank you.
So that's that. Then I'm also going to be, I'm on holiday in UK right now. I'm coming back in a few weeks, and I've decided on this journey that the next time I'm coming back, I am going to be among the 17 million diasporans. I have decided to Japa myself. And as the last lady said, she's at the ripe old age of 45, but I'm 50. But I wouldn't want to take up our time to explain why I'm Japaing at 50. So thank you very much, Victor. You've been fantastic.
Thank you. We are going to take Suleiman, and I cannot refuse my mother, whose hand just came up, so we'll also be taking her. I don't know if that was a question per se, so maybe we would just take this last three, Victor, and then would that be okay if we take all this, the last three hands that are up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So Suleiman, please go ahead and keep it brief, please. We are at the
All
end.
right. All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. My name is Suleiman Mande. I work with Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, in Abuja here, the Democratic Governance Department. So I just want to make a comment about the presentation and all the contributions from the participants. Now, we have raised a very important issue that the root cause of the problem has to be addressed. And I like the fact that Mr. Victor talked about, collective responsibility for addressing governance issues in every country in the world. This is a very important thing. But I would like to point out the fact that, in Nigeria, we have very, very critical development issues, key issues that must be addressed by government, by all stakeholders, in order for issues like migration, like unemployment, should be effectively addressed. Like when we talk about democratic governance, we are talking about issues like human rights side by side with the rule of law, provision of basic infrastructure, education, healthcare, agriculture, and all that, so that people can be able to effectively live their lives in a way that that other countries or other economies do not attract them. So they don't have to leave their own countries or their families to migrate to another country to add value to the economies of those countries. So what I'm talking about here is that, the root cause of the problem, and I like the fact that somebody addressed the leaders do not respect the system. So this is, I think, the critical issue in Nigeria and across Africa. Leaders must have deep respect for the system that brings them on board. They must have respect for the people. They must respect the values, the norms, and the dignity of the people through provision of basic amenities that will help people have confidence in them and in their countries, so that people can contribute effectively to the development of their respective places. Thank you very much. This is my little contribution.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we are not going to take any other hands after Professor Grange. So we'll take Innocent, and then the last would be Professor Grange. Thank you. Mr. Innocent, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening all. Thank you, Mr. Victor, and thank you, the organizers, for this wonderful event. I just wanted to mention a few, talking about the brain waste. Maybe just to say that, can we do something a little bit more proactive than the one where there's integration through the embassies, through the Nigerian missions abroad? something about developing the requisite skill sets within Nigeria before they move. Because again, the migration thing is here with us and it's going to continue, because looking at the state of the nation, the policies of government, the general attitude of people, you see that security and many other factors, people will keep migrating. Yeah, and then, but one of the greatest challenges, they get in there and they find themselves at a certain income level. They can't go above that income level because of the system. But if they go in there with qualifications that takes them at to a higher income band, they are able to make a reasonable they are able to make a reasonable living, and also able to contribute back home. So the intervention should be right here in Nigeria, developing, identifying those skill sets that would help them be employable when they get in there, so that by the time they get there, they can get the right employment. And then talking about Edo State has one of the highest remittance, diaspora remittances. And I think one of those banks, like First Bank, has that kind of huge fund coming in, and it's mainly in Edo State. And again, it is actually to uplift the average income of the families. If you check Edo State, they are predominantly civil servants, and then there's hardly any how an average family can rise above poverty level without the help of somebody who travels overseas and comes back and take more of the siblings or family members overseas. So that is essentially what is happening over there. So my hope is that IOM and every other bodies that could really intervene should identify those skill sets that are employable over there and that can give them a higher income band. Let them develop, let those skills be developed here before they even move across the borders to other countries. And I think that's just all. And I say, Victor, thank you very much for that presentation and your painstaking effort to answer the questions. Thank you to the organizers also. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Ma. I've asked you to. So that'll be the last one. And then Victor, if you could take those. And then I think there are a couple of questions from the chat. And then we can close. Thank you.
Thank you, Jumoke, and thank you, Joseph. My hand went up late for two reasons. First, I wanted to listen to all the various perspectives, and you have covered them very well. So my questions are just going to be two short ones. And the second reason why my hand went up late was because I just could not type my message. I don't know what's happened. So there we are. Now, my two short comments and questions are this. In any unsupportive environment, the female gender suffers more. So I wonder if you can just briefly tell us what is the situation with women in diaspora. My second question, or maybe not a question, just to ask for your advice, and that is the fact that we do need a lot more data if we want to go into advocacy, policy advocacy. And how can we organize ourselves so that we, first of all, leverage on existing data, and then how do we generate more with support from organizations like your own? Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. Go ahead, Victor, with those questions. Or do you want me to read the ones from the chat as well?
Let me start with these ones, and then we can look at the chat. Thank you very much. These are fantastic questions, and it's a fantastic discussion, and I'm really honored to be here. And thank you for dedicating time to discuss this. Now, the interpretation that gentleman had for why do people from Edo migrate, that would be true, except this behavior is very much alike Moldovan migrants, Kosovo migrants, Bosnian migrants, Who else do I know? For sure, Bulgarian migrants. So all of them, they're behaving exactly as you described. They're going abroad, they're making money, they're sending back money, they're building a house, they're making a nice house so that the neighbors can see, big fences so that, you know, some parts can be seen, some parts cannot be seen, and so on. So, you know, the behavior and sometimes that denote not a good financial education with the first wave of migrants is not so unique to the people from Edo State. You can see same patterns of behavior in different other parts of the world. These type of expenditures with the element of show off, again, this is present everywhere. So this doesn't really answer the question why it's not specific for people from any other state around Edo or any other state in Nigeria. The point here is not so much about why this is happening, but how can we make sure, how can we work together with these people to make sure that the money, which is theirs, right, 100% theirs, how can we help them so that they make better investments? How can we help them so that we can diversify the products? One reason why they are building houses, of course, it's because they never had houses. It was always like a value. But on the other side, why don't we have different other products on the market that they can invest in? They can bring development. One house built in Benin City does not, except the construction job that it makes, doesn't bring a lot of value to the market, right? How can we design products for the people to invest in so that brings more development to the country, creates more jobs, you know, starts more economic development processes? I think that's the key question for not just for diaspora, but generally for the migration management process. And to make a Japa at 50 is a very young age. So really the question, and a question that comes in different persons were asking and alluding to about, you know, migrating. I think overall, the government should have several principles when they design their migration policy. And as long as the principle is we have to protect the rights of the Nigerians, we have to respect their choices wherever they are, as long as they are within the legal parameters. I think if these are the key principles, then the migration policies will be aligned to what most of you were recommending today, including, for example, the recommendation that we have to develop that skill set that will help the migrants find a decent, meaningful, a good employment abroad. That's exactly the logic. Like, for example, the employment agency, be it at the federal level or at the state level, like Edo Jobs, when they are investing in technical and vocational schools or in professional education, what kind of professions should they promote? Of course, they have to look at the national labor market first, but they have to also consider the labor market abroad, where the Nigerians are going. Because ultimately, if the purpose is employment, then the foreign labor markets have to be taken into account. If the mandate is employment in Nigeria only, it's also justified, but it's not a 21st century employment strategy. It's not an employment policy that fits the current reality. Women, unfortunately, there are two things that I have to mention. Women, for sure, suffer more in being on the move. We hear very complicated stories, especially the very young girls from Nigeria who are exploited in trafficking in Mali, in the gold mines. We hear stories when, you know, women have to take contraceptives because they know they will have to pay with sex to smugglers to get, you know, to the final destination. So I have to recognize that women do suffer much more on the migration pathway now. but at the same time, there is no effective diaspora mobilization without women taking the leading role. There is no effective migration management policies without, women really having the leadership position. So having a gender-sensitive approach in migration policy is not just recommended, it's the key ingredient for success. And I couldn't agree more with having the need to have a good data, having a good data and having a policy to design good data. I think the key ingredient here is always to have a very strong methodology. I hear a lot of tentatives sometimes from organizations, just, let's interview 10 people, and then we get back and we announce the results, and maybe this will help us understand better. Well, 10 people is not a sample, and this is not a methodologically sound research and results. Sometimes some of the results can lead you in completely different directions. Sometimes this type of research can discredit the research and the topic at the same time. So I think having a respect towards the data, towards strong and scientifically sound methodologies, this is where we have to start. Invest money, invest high qualifications in producing really meaningful data, really solid from the scientific perspective. Having very high quality data is more important than having a lot of data. And in this respect, I think we're happy to work together. We're happy to join forces to fundraise for projects that will generate data. We're happy to invest methodological approaches and like scientifically sound approaches to accumulate forces together so that we can do researches like that. Thank you.
Thank you. So the one question I'm going to read that was sent is, can Nigeria be like Philippines, where there's more government involvement and organized migration of their citizens and negotiate for their well-being and harnessing experiences from those countries? How also how can we make Nigeria a place for the West to outsource their services? This would provide jobs and bring sense of hope. This model has increased percentage of middle class in the Philippines and also improved their quality of life.
I think we more or less discussed already about that. I think diaspora can play a role into that, in being these, investment promoters, in being those who would actually open the eyes of foreign investors into the opportunities that exist in Nigeria, that could present, at the same time, the risks, the challenges, the complications, the difficult parts, right? But I think this is where we have to become very serious about the diaspora policy, about various implications, and how do we actually invest into that. We need serious diaspora investment forums here in Nigeria, in different parts of the country, not just in Lagos, right? In different parts, in different systems, depending on what kind of investments we want and where exactly. We also have to start doing diaspora investment forums out there. We have to do it in Veneto region in Italy because it's a big concentration of businesses and Nigerians. We have to do them in London. We have to do them in New York. We have to do them in Delhi, even in Beijing. So we have to do them in different parts, making sure that we attract attention, that we discuss parameters, and that the government is actually following up on the recommendations and what they hear from the diaspora members and from the foreign investors. So it's a lot of space to work in here.
Thank you so very much. Really appreciate the time you have spent with us here, and look forward to working with you on this diaspora initiative. And I must apologize to those that I did not take. We really are up on time, and I had to take Professor Grange. She's my mother, so I can't refuse that. No discrimination or disregard for anyone whatsoever. So my apologies again. I don't know if So we also have a couple of announcements and we are going to close. Victor, thank you. I know you have put your contact information in the chat room. There is quite a lot of work to do together, and I'm sure we'll be able to pull more collaborators in to address some of these issues that you have raised here. So a couple of very important announcements from ALG. Faye, please go ahead and prepare Pastor Olu's birthday celebration. It's Pastor Olu's birthday today, and it's a big deal. He's always behind the scenes. So we just wanted to take a couple of minutes to just celebrate him and wish him well. But before we do that, we also want to announce ALG's SOLAG, our first Citizens Responsibility course. We are launching that, and classes will be starting in July. This is in collaboration with other organizations in the civil society space. And the importance of this training or Citizens Responsibility course is really to inform, to provide the information and education that citizens need to successfully engage in nation building. If we're able to build that Nigeria of our dreams, then Japa syndrome will be a thing of the past. If we're able to build a Nigeria, then we ourselves will now have to enforce immigration policies to prevent others from coming to Nigeria. So it's a very important course. We ask that you please go ahead and register for it. Faye, can you please post the link to the course? If not, you can just email membership@africaleadershipgroup.org, and we would go ahead and send you the information to register. I see my senior VP is here. Pastor Sonny, did you have any other comments before we take more announcements? Okay, I would assume not. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I don't know if Mr. President has any more comments before we close. Wanted to thank you again, Victor, for such a brilliant session. And I know we've talked, and there's quite a lot to do, so we definitely would be in touch with you. And I know a few people have also expressed interest in reaching out to you. So thank you for your time, really appreciate it. And one last thing I would like you to address: what is the responsibility of these host countries in ensuring that migration is reduced? That's something for you to think about. You don't need to, it's something that I think we also need to look at, because they do have a responsibility in protecting their borders also. So thank you, everyone. And can we play Pastor Olu's birthday video? There is no sound. Can you share sound as well? Faye. Can you share the sound so that we can hear? You always want to step behind. Okay, you're playing sound. Okay, thank you. So I was the one with all the glory, while you were the one with all the strength. Beautiful face without a name for so long. A beautiful smile, the high of hate. Did you ever know that you're my hero? You're everything I wished I could be. And I got my life that go. Happy birthday, Pastor Olu. We appreciate you, we celebrate you, and we love you very much. Sending you tons of hugs from California. So very happy birthday to you. And there's a lot of happy birthdays in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. God bless you.
Thank you. So does Mr. President want to come up for any additional, for last comments? Oh, we're good.
Well, Olu, happy birthday. Oh. My own is the Lord will forgive your sins. I show you
And
the
we
mark.
say amen.
In Jesus' name. But sincerely, I want to thank Olu. He's been a great pillar of support, pillar of ideas, consistent, and really, really dedicated, and understands the way my mind works. I really, really thank him. And not just him, the whole body of staff that he leads, who have been phenomenal here and there. Nobody's perfect, but it's been phenomenal. And they really made work and life easy for me. I thank everyone. Olu, have a happy birthday. The Lord will bless you. The Lord will keep you. The Lord will look after your gentle wife and your lovely children. In Jesus' name. And this is just the beginning. I know that God is taking us to great places. Amen. I pray for you. I love you. I appreciate you. And God will bless you mightily in Jesus' name. So thank you so much. You've done an awesome job today. You've opened our eyes to great possibilities. Some of the things you mentioned in the first time out, but now you've really, really brought it home and ingrained it. And I think it's something that we all must think deeply about, run with, see how we can really help Nigeria with these migration issues. I want to assure you, like I've said before, that we will work together, whatever way we can, both as the church and also as African Leadership Group, to make things a bit better and work with you all. Thank you very much for being in Nigeria. Thank you for the work that you're doing. My warm regards to your wife and your family. And we will be tapping on you from time to time. And I look forward to you continuing our discussions in various areas as we have done before. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a wonderful weekend ahead. God bless you indeed.
Thank you, Victor. So I'll be waiting for that document.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure and a big honor to be here with you. And please follow up with me individually if we can do things together, if I can, help with more information. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We are glad you're here. Same time next week, same Zoom link, same great host. We'll see you next week. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you and have a good evening. And go ahead, Faye. Also, the link to the CRC course is in the chat room. Please go ahead and register, or if you know someone that would be interested in learning more about how they can be an engaged citizen in this course of rebuilding Nigeria. Nigeria deserves better than what we have right now, and we all have that responsibility to building a great nation. So thank you all. Have a good evening and enjoy the rest of your Salah. For those of you that killed Ram today, you can cyberspace it to the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Pastor Victor.
Thank you.
The course is free for now, but there are terms and conditions apply. You will get to find out, but it's generally free.
It's free.
But there are terms and conditions that apply. Thanks.
The terms and conditions is not, we are not going to come and ask you for money later. We just ask that you please complete the modules, that you commit to attending the classes, because again, we're doing this for free. Typically it costs quite a bit of money for the facilitators are also doing this pro bono, and we don't want to really waste people's time. We want to maximize the resources we have. So that's the condition, that you sign up and you commit to attending the modules. So thank you again. Have a good evening, and we'll see you next week. God bless you.
Bye.
Bye.